Welcome back to Through the Veil podcast. I'm Rachel.
I'm Elle.
I'm Camille.
And today, if you're not watching this on YouTube, you should be. We've got the husbands. Introduce yourself, please.
I'm Jeff.
And I'm Madison.
Madison belongs to Elle, Jeff belongs to Camille. Hopefully their voices will be distinct enough that you'll be able to follow along well. So the idea behind today's podcast is that behind every great woman is a very lucky man. And so we wanted to bring the husbands on today to hear about their experiences being married to someone with these specific spiritual gifts and get a little bit into what their spiritual gifts might be, how they support their wives or not, and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis in your homes. So start us off, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you met your wife. Let's start with you, Jeff.
So I met Camille while I was in law school in Orange County. It was a blind date. Basically, my roommate wanted to go out with her friend and needed a plus one.
Yeah.
And so we were the plus ones and the only ones that worked out.
God doing matchmaking from afar right there. Yeah. So I'm Madison. I met Elle because I walked into one of my classes at college, walked into a class and I was looking for a new girlfriend, and I was scanning the classroom and I was like, who's this tall blonde beauty that sat behind her? And then she turned around, talked to me, and 12 years, 4 kids later, here we are.
I will say it was also the arrangement of God. He wasn't supposed to be in that class.
I was not. I was supposed to have taken that class the semester before, but for some reason it wasn't offered, and I took a different class, and then it met her. So
That's awesome. I'm getting a little faded vibe here from the both of you. Both of you are lawyers, right?
Right?
unfortunately,
Yeah.
you talk to any attorney, and I don't know anyone who's like, I'm so glad I do this.
True. So tell us what kind of law you guys do, starting with you, Jeff.
I do corporate securities law, which no one knows what that is, but that's what I do.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Really
I've heard of
exciting.
it.
What about you, Madison? What kind of law are you in?
So I've done family law. I've worked for the state of Pennsylvania prosecuting nurses, and then currently I work for the United States Army as a judge advocate.
So would you say that you guys have higher than average critical thinking skills?
Unfortunately.
We're,
Oh, sorry,
we're
I thought you
men.
were arguing school skills. I got confused. Yes.
We're men, so usually we're not very good at critical thinking. We usually fly off the cuff. But
Yeah.
there's a reason you go to law school to learn critical thinking.
So that leads me into the question of when did you discover your wife's spiritual gifts and how did this fit with your reality of the world?
I'll go first, I guess. So I found out about Camille's gifts while we were dating still, which is kind of unique. Was it at Crystal Cove?
It was at Crystal Cove.
We were at Crystal Cove, which is a beach in Southern California, and walking around. And apparently my grandfather who passed away came to her.
Yeah.
And what did he say?
He whispered in my right ear, he said, "Take good care of my boy." And at first I was like, who is this? Like, who's talking? And then I figured it out because they were close and that was his grandpa had passed. I was like, and then I thought about it and it was like, yeah, that's who it is. It felt right.
She's a little awkward because we were only dating. We weren't engaged or anything yet.
But we were like moving toward, we kind of knew.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was inevitable.
So that was the first time, I think.
Did you tell Jeff right then and there on the
yeah.
date?
Oh, yeah. I just said, I think your grandpa wants me to tell you. Well, he told me. I just told him. Yeah.
So Jeff, what did you
Ballsy.
It is. If you know Camille, you know she's ballsy. Yeah, it didn't really surprise me, actually. Unless you remember differently.
No.
I don't remember being surprised or anything. I was just like, I thought it was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like, my grandpa passed away when I was probably like 12 or 13. And so I always like had like, I don't know that you'd call it a strong relationship, but like I had kind of like a strong affection towards him and loved him a lot. And we have a lot in common.
Yeah, you guys have like an affinity
Yeah,
towards each other.
that's a good word to describe it. So yeah, it didn't really, well, it did surprise me. It didn't shock me, I guess, is a better way to describe it.
Okay, Madison, when did you find out about Elle's spiritual gifts, and what was your very first thought and impression about it?
So like I remember when we were dating, I would always talk about like she was always very vague about her experiences, but she'd be like, yeah, when I was in high school, I had this experience and I was a little witchy and I was a little gothic. And so she was talking about all these things. And then she was like, yeah, I remember like seeing a spirit in my room. And then I'd have my brother come and he'd have to like sleep in my bedroom or in my closet. Or when I was on
Never in
my,
my closet, always on my floor.
Okay.
Didn't put him in the closet. That's where the scary things were.
but she was always talking about these things and, like, I served my mission in for our church in Argentina, and while I was there, there were always people like that. Like there was a large population of people who practiced basically like voodoo, and so like people were always seeing spirits, like missionaries, when they would go into people's houses or in their apartments, and so it was just kind of like yeah, I believe that you saw something. I mean, we're always told that there's spirits on the other side of the veil trying to talk to us. We know that, Satan and his spirits are out here trying to tempt us. So it's like, yeah, I definitely believe you can talk to them and never. And then as, our marriage progressed and everything, she started trying to develop the gift. And I was just kind of like, yeah, makes. And then as she was going through like the process of like, oh yeah, it's basically kind of like receiving revelation. You're just paying attention to the spirit and listening to that still small voice, and except instead of it being the Holy Ghost, it's someone who used to be alive.
So he's prepared.
Yeah.
Have either of you had your own spiritual experiences where you have seen or spoken to or had your own kind of revelatory experience with the spirit?
Not on the level that Camille has. I haven't seen any spirits or heard them. Usually it's like a thought in my head, is how I connect. It's really like cerebral, which is weird.
Not weird. You're a lawyer.
It's normal.
Yeah.
It's a different way.
Like, yeah, it's a different way. So like when Wes, our son, passed away, I'd get like thoughts about certain things from him. But so it makes it hard rather than a feeling, right? At least for me, because it's like, I'm also neurotic because I'm a lawyer. So I'm like, am I just making...
We're very high strung.
Yeah, high strung. Am I making this up in my head or, so I guess I'm not as practiced, but it's mostly thoughts for me.
So I've never really had an experience of hearing, a voice or recognizing it as being someone beyond the veil. But I listened to the podcast, but I can't remember exactly, what's been discussed. But when Elle and I were first, within our first year of marriage, my brother committed suicide, and he wasn't, active in our church. He wasn't making a lot of really good life decisions. He was in a bad place when he took his life. And periodically, like I've never heard him like speak directly to me or anything like that, but he does visit me in my dreams, and he comes to me. And the thing that I think is really funny is that either we're playing football together. We both played football in high school together on the offensive line. And so it'll be like just going through, even though I'm 30 years old, it's like, why am I in high school playing football? Like, and I'm concerned about what my high school coach thinks. Like, so like we'll be going through like just a normal day, like talking to him. Or the other scenario where I talk to him is like where I'm on my mission and he's my companion. And when he's my companion, like at the very start, after he first committed suicide and he came to me in the stream, he was like the worst companion ever. Like he was the missionary who was breaking all the rules. He was swearing. I couldn't get him to do any work, and I was just getting really frustrated. But he just had it was his 10-year anniversary, or it will be his 10-year anniversary this year. This Christmas will be his 10-year anniversary of his death. And like in those 10 years, like I've seen him change in the dreams. Like every time he comes, he's a little bit different, to the point where like instead of being like, hey, we got to go and do some contacting and try to talk to people and spread the gospel, and he's like, screw you. Now it's when we're talking, it's like, hey, we gotta go. It's like, fine, and he'll like begrudgingly get up and do it instead of just like belligerently sit on the couch and be like, no, not happening. With Elle, Elle or other people, whenever they communicate with my brother across the veil, they're like, yeah, he's in a completely different place. And Elle's been able to see how things have progressed just talking to him and how he interacts with us.
That's amazing in and of itself that like you have these recurring dreams where you're either playing
Yeah.
football or on a mission together.
And they're different every time, so it's not like a repeated dream,
Yeah.
which is really fun. And he's always quite a character. It's somewhat unpredictable. So
I love it. Will you show us what's in your arms? Because we can hear her hiccuping.
So for those of you who are watching this, I'm trying to get her. So this is our little month-old daughter, Trinity. And so
Oh, she's
she's
so
why
cute.
there's been a little bit of a hiatus for the recordings.
Oh my
Say
God.
hi, world.
We talked about her a lot last week.
We did.
Yeah.
yes.
Face to a
I
name.
get to see her. She's so excited to be on the podcast, making her believe you.
So excited to not be asleep.
So tell us, what are your spiritual gifts? What spiritual gifts do you think you have been given?
Big assumption to assume we have spiritual gifts.
Yeah, big assumption. I'll let you go
Not
first
everyone's
on
so
this
blessed.
I know what Jeff's not going to talk about his, so I'll just talk about it.
I think it's a question for us, probably.
Let me just lean in and let you know what's going on. So,
What's the female form of like mansplaining?
Yeah, this.
so I noticed with Jeff when we were first married, that in our church, when, for example, somebody's sick, you can ask somebody who's a priest who holds the priesthood to give you a blessing. It's like a special prayer. And I noticed that when Jeff does give priesthood blessings, and we talked about this on a recent episode when we were interviewing James, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Jeff has this gift of being able to articulate really well in blessings and be very specific. So when in our faith tradition, when our children are, for example, like babies, we do a blessing, right? Like a special priesthood blessing when they're babies. A lot of churches do something similar. And I remember in my daughter's blessing, our oldest daughter, he was very specific about certain things she would do in her life. And I was like, that was unconventional. And then I noticed when he would give me blessings when I was sick, these really specific, just really pinpointed like things that I was dealing with. It's like he would just go for it. He wouldn't try to like, what am I supposed to say here? Or like, what do people usually say? His are always unique and very tailored and spot on. And so I feel like he has a gift for being able to listen to what God wants him to say and to articulate it well. So it feels like God really knows me and knows what's going on with me. In fact, just the other day, I've been sick for like 3 weeks, off and on. And I asked him to give me a blessing because I'm tired of being sick. And he actually like talked about that for a second. And then he shifted to talking about me and this gift. And he's like, I just felt like that's what the blessing was supposed to be about. So that's what I got and took notes afterwards. It was great. But yeah, he's always like able to be in tune and just say what the Lord wants me to hear in that moment.
It's awesome. For those not watching, Jeff just shrugged like, yeah.
All right, I guess.
I mean,
Mostly it's like I just never know what to say, so I just sit there until something comes in my head.
That's how it
Sounds like
works.
it's working.
Yeah, I guess I'm doing it right.
I mean, but not everyone does that. Like, I mean, as a fellow, priesthood holder having to give blessings, like some people give a lot of really generic things like, oh, I should say this, oh, I should say that. Not everyone, sits there and waits for the Spirit to talk to them and to figure out, because there's times where I remember in Argentina, like I don't speak their language. I don't know the people very well, maybe for a couple of weeks, and they'd be like, I need a blessing. And it's all about having to be able to listen to the Spirit and figure out what comes. And there's people who can do that and people who just don't. And they're like, well, I'll just say what I think they want to hear. So it is a big time gift.
There you go.
That's
That's
that
my
validation.
Support.
I love
Okay,
it.
Elle, what's Madison's gift?
I don't have one. I am giftless.
That mustache is a gift.
Right.
Yes, my mustache is a gift that keeps on giving. It used to be a lot better, but
It's arguable. Um, his strength, I would think, is faith. Like he is one of those people that just has this gift of belief that is, it's like rock steady. It is a core part of his person, and it is a gift to have faith. I mean, there are those people that have the faith to move mountains, and there's people like me who are like, I'm not sure about this.
That was one of the things, like when we were dating, that I was like kind of a little taken aback, because for me, I was like, yeah, church is true. Like I know that, Jesus Christ lives. I know that he died for my sins. I know that the priesthood is here on the earth, and I know that um I know that this is for me the true church.
That
Like,
God loves his
yeah,
children.
I know that God loves, like, and I've never had any doubts, even when I was a kid. And like people will confront me because, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, like there are a couple of things where people are like, well, what about this? And what about that? I'm like, it doesn't matter. I've prayed, I've received revelation from God, and nothing that a person on earth's going to tell me is going to change what God's told me.
So this is a
Because
strength and a weakness because it's like arguing with a rock. You could use the most logical argument in the world and you can't convince him out of anything once he's made his mind up. So
a very inarticulate rock.
he also, I think, has a gift of compassion.
No, I don't.
Not
It's like I hate everyone.
expressed.
Not in the traditional sense.
He is a nurturing soul. Like he knows he can see a need and he can care for someone in that way. He might be emotionally dead inside. So if he sees a need, especially within his family, he's going to go address that need and he's going to go meet someone where they have that need before they even know that they have it or that they need to express it. And that's a beautiful thing.
He should have gone into therapy.
Yeah.
That'd be a horrible idea because he's a good
No,
listener, but
because-
he's not a good empathizer.
So back to this faith, okay? So when you're in mixed company of maybe some more conservative or narrow-minded people, do you ever feel worried about how your wife is going to be perceived or treated, whether you're in a church setting or a non-church setting? Do you ever worry about her standing in the church and what might happen should her gifts be more well known?
I don't.
It's like Camille
I think
can fend for herself.
Yeah, I think she worries about it a lot more than I do. Because it's something we talk about, and usually I'm just maybe not emotionally caring enough. I'm just like, who cares? Like that's their problem. It's not your problem. But obviously, it's something she might have to deal with in the future. So I worry about it in the sense that I know it'll be something like stressful and maybe hard for her to go through, depending on the circumstances and what happens. But I don't worry about it that much. I know how awesome she is, and I know like she'll, kind of navigate that challenge really well if it ever comes up. But it'll be something hard to deal with, depending on what happens, if anything.
And where do you think that comes from for you? I mean, you said you kind of just don't care what people think, but your faith and your activity in it and all these things it's a lot. That would be a lot to lose.
It is a lot. And I think really for both of us, just our relationship with our faith in the church has changed a lot since our son passed away. We've had, and especially her, I feel like she's had so many spiritual experiences knowing that what she's doing is right and good, that I think having that confirmation has made it so much easier not to stress about what may happen in the future.
There's a whole, like, the kingdom of God, if you think about like Jesus coming back and the 1,000 years of peace, and it's going to be bigger than just one church, right? Or bigger than even all the Christian churches combined, right? Because when Jesus came the first time, he shook everything up. Even just like the Sermon on the Mount was revolutionary. And so I think it would be naive to think that things won't be shooken up at least a little bit when he comes back again. And I feel like the kingdom of God is bigger than a church. And it's like, if you think about it like the vineyard, maybe my corner of the vineyard that I feel called to be focusing on, spirit communication, helping people heal from loss, particularly child loss. That's where I've been called to serve. And if that maybe conflicts with the corner of the vineyard where my church is called to serve, very covenant focused church. Maybe I have a different strength that maybe isn't recognized in my church at this point, but that doesn't mean that God hasn't called me to that corner of the vineyard. It just means it's personal for me.
What about you, Madison? Do you ever get worried?
I mean, I wasn't worried until our old bishop tried to get us in trouble. So, I mean, once you have a leader in the church, saying like, yes, Sister Hales was doing this thing. I don't think it's right. And, we moved and left that congregation. And then when we got to our new congregation, he reached out. He's like, I want to be careful. Like, Sister Hales is communicating with spirits and might not all be good. And it's like, that you're an idiot. One, like, well, because so I've never understood people who in our church who are so worried about spirit communicate, especially when it's not like, because we have conferences in our church where every 6 months, and there's always at least 2 or 3 talks where we're very focused with our ancestry because we believe that we are linked with our ancestors in a never-ending chain that goes throughout all eternity. And so you have all these leaders of our church who are always talking about how they have communication from family members or are talking about stories from family members who reached out across the veil to talk to us because, my grandparents were very involved in my life. My grandparents, they're not going to be like, oh, well, I'm dead. I don't care about Madison anymore. No, they're still involved. They still want to be a part. They still want to know, what's going on. And not just that, but like my grandma on my father's side, she loved her grandchildren to the point where she always knew how, like, oh, we just had like our 40th grandchild and we have 20 great grandchildren, like she knew exactly the exact number. She knew everyone's birthday. Her grandchildren were her world to her. And so like these great grandchildren that she's never got to meet, I know that she's very invested in them in their lives. And so she wants to be around all of them. And that doesn't stop. So if there's people who aren't able to listen, like I said, like I've never heard anything directly from anyone. I've had dreams with my brother, that's it. But, that's why there's people, translators, like, Elle, Camille, and you, Rachel, you guys are translators for those of us who don't speak the language yet. But it's something we can all learn eventually. So, like, I've never understood the people in the church who were like, whoa, you can't do that. It's like, one, you're putting limits on God and the Spirit. And who are you to be putting a limit on God? And I've always said like Christianity doesn't really make sense. We believe that a man died and then came back to life, something that science says is physically impossible, but then you're gonna be like, yeah, it's okay for someone to die and come back to life, but you can't talk to someone who's dead. That's impossible. So it's like people, get caught up in their fallacies and, not using logic to think things through, and they're, it's whatever scares them. So I do worry about people's fear or their lack of understanding of the gospel or their own just stupidity. But luckily, the Lord's, kind of like Jeff was saying, we've received revelation from the Lord that this is the path we're supposed to be on. This is what Elle's supposed to be doing. And nobody can tell me that what she's doing is evil because I've seen, Bible always says, by the fruits of their labor will you know them. I've seen her fruit. I've seen the fruit that you, Camille, have done. It is good. You guys are helping so many people to be able to heal, to be able to move on past tragedies, past traumas. And I mean, how can you say if you're helping someone who lost a child be able to talk to them, how can you say that that's evil?
I will sum up the end of his story that he began here because I've not talked about it openly on the podcast, but
Was I not supposed to talk about that?
having moved into this area, into a different ecclesiastical leadership in this area, as our church is structured. It's a very structured faith. So we have leadership that kind of trickles down and goes in tiers. And our local authorities became aware of the situation as our prior authority contacted local authority, and it moved up the chain of command all the way up to
Church headquarters.
Church headquarters, and the answer came back through the leadership here that it was a recognized gift of the Spirit. And so I think he's actually probably more open about it than I am.
She gets mad at me because I'll be talking to people and be like, yeah, my wife,
My wife
does
has
this.
gifts, and I'm
Yeah.
like,
You're her hype man.
he outs me everywhere he goes.
Tell me this. Have your wife's gifts ever worried you? Because you talked about before people's fears, their misunderstanding of the gift. Has it ever been negative for her or for you? Have you ever had any of those? Because, I feel like one of the biggest fears is that when you open yourself up to communicating with spirits, you open yourself up for the bad as well as the good. And I think that is what it becomes, fear-based. So how do you guys deal with that? Have her gifts ever worried you or been scary?
Am I scared and in awe of my wife's powers?
Not exactly,
No.
not exactly the
No.
question. But the answer to that is yes.
I thought he restated that perfectly. That's what I heard.
I do remember when we were living in Pennsylvania for law school, we were right near Gettysburg, which very haunted town. And we did a historical tour, and then we went ghost hunting. And we went to this bridge where a lot of people have died and hung themselves, and I don't believe in ghost hunting, but that's a topic for another day. But while we were there, like as we left the area and we drove home, I was like, I feel like there's something not right. And she's like, yeah. And she's like, I think a spirit followed us home. And she's like, yeah, someone followed us home. Like we need to tell him to, leave us alone. He needs to go back to the bridge. And so like there are situations like that occasionally
We're attractive.
where yeah, they're like, ooh, someone who speaks my language. Hey friend, come here. And then, we have this spirit that's kind of, and normally they're harmless, but I do remember that one was a little like, okay, there's something not right about this spirit in particular.
I'm
But
not going to move on until you give me a sneak preview of why you don't believe in ghost hunting, though.
I think it's just people. It's one of those things where it's kind of like people want to believe what they want to believe.
It's the tech of the ghost hunting. He doesn't doubt the gift or that the fact that there are spirits that may be lingering here, but he thinks all the equipment and the whole hype about it is all just frivolous nonsense.
Jeff, back to you. You ever been afraid?
I haven't that I can think of. I mean, I'm afraid of my wife every day, but for different reasons.
She lays down the hammer.
I wish.
Blink twice if she's holding you against your will.
That was a two blinker.
On this podcast, is that what you were afraid of?
Yeah, right.
No. Well, so we've had I don't know that it scared me, but we've had spirits in. So we live in Utah. We moved to California last year for a year and came back. And when we came back, I think it was one of the kids that
Yeah, it was our older son.
mentioned the basement just felt really not good juju. And
But that wasn't a result
Technical
of
term.
doing what I
Juju.
do. It was like that when we came back, and then my son said he'd had an experience before we moved where he saw the water turning on by itself in the kitchen at night. And so we've had a few renters in our basement, so I don't know, possibly it followed one of them in. It wasn't as a result of me doing sessions with grieving people.
no, it's separate from that, but it's
Yeah.
experiences where it's a bad feeling. And so Camille had a little conversation.
Well, we had actually Lisa, who was featured on the podcast, came over. She's close by, and she kind of helped me navigate the situation. Yeah.
Trinity agreed.
Agreed.
All of that.
Yeah.
She also knows Elisa.
It's actually really nice. I appreciate my wife having this gift because in our old house, there had only been two owners, and the second owner of our old house had died in the home, and he refused to leave. And so our kids would be walking in the house, they're like, "Is there someone here? I feel like there's a ghost by the fireplace." And so we're like, "Yeah, that's our family ghost. His name's Jim." It's like, "Is he okay?" It's like, "Yeah, Mom talked to him. He's cool. He's he just wants to see what you kids are doing. He just wants to be a part of our family. He really likes our home, likes our family." So it was one of those things where it's been nice because our kids can be sensitive to it, and she can reassure them don't worry, the presence you're feeling, he's harmless. It's just Jim.
It's good for monsters at night.
Yeah.
Did Jim ever follow you to your new house, or did he stay in Pennsylvania?
No, he would just. I wouldn't say it was like a haunting. It was just a presence where
Yeah.
he would check in frequently. He had spots where we could see him sometimes. The children saw him a couple times, or smell.
Yeah, he always smelled like some
Barbecue.
barbecue, right next to our fireplace, and it was only
front door.
one particular area by our fireplace.
Yeah.
Will you guys tell me what your most powerful or memorable experiences you've had with your wife's gifts?
I like usually the same people come through with me, and I've never been there for like the really like helping people heal. But I do remember
He
when
gets bored sitting in sessions with friends and stuff.
I
He
do.
gets bored.
I
He falls asleep. He's seen it too many times.
Yeah, we had one where it was like really helpful for a friend of ours. Like he was seeing his dad for the first time, and he had a really close relationship, and I completely fell asleep in the middle of the reading. But to be fair, it was like 2 in the morning. But um, the most memorable for me, because I found it was hilarious. My little brother, as I stated, who died, he comes through very, very strong as a very strong presence, and he's everyone always describes him as a wild presence and a wild energy. And so when Elle was first developing her gift, she was like, okay, I gotta meditate and see if anything comes through. And so she's sitting there in our tiny apartment in a chair, and she's like, your brother just passed by. I'm like, oh yeah? Yeah, he walked just like from this end over through the living room, passed through the TV, into the kitchen, and like he's over by the fridge now. Like I can see him in my mind. He's over by the fridge. I was like, oh, okay. And he's naked. And and I was like, what? It's like, yeah, he's naked. I'm like, Jonathan, put some clothes on. She's like, okay, he's still rummaging through the fridge and he just gave you the finger. And I was like, that's totally my brother. And the reason it was so funny was because my brother like had this habit of either walking around in just his underwear or completely naked, even when he was like in his early 20s and everything. He just did not care about decorum, to the point where when I brought Elle actually to my house for Christmas, so the first Christmas when we were engaged, we fell asleep on the couch talking in the living room, and my brother came out to get a glass of water or something, and completely buck naked and
Oh, he
just
was in his underwear.
oh, he was in his
in
underwear.
briefs.
Okay, yeah, so he was
Got a
in,
real good view.
so he was in his underwear and just walked in, saw her, it's like yeah, and kept going. So
I didn't know it was a pattern though.
What about you, Jeff?
Um, I think for me, it's so my mom passed away the same week as our son, and she's a very bossy lady. I love her to death. Persistent,
Please.
but she always
Passionate.
There you go.
she always likes to give Camille advice about our family or me.
Like when she was alive, she loved to give advice, and
Yeah.
she's still, yeah.
And so she still does
He
it.
still does.
And I guess it's the most memorable because I find it annoying. I feel like she gives her insights about me that maybe I don't share or don't want to.
Yeah. She's basically a narc. She like narcs them out.
She's a total narc.
Private inner thoughts.
Like most recently,
I just did a session with McKinley a few days ago.
Yeah.
And it was like half of it was about Jeff. And I was like, literally, I'm here. Like, let's talk about me. It's all about him. And it's
It
his
was.
mom talking the whole time about our kids' medical stuff going on, like vitamins they need for their mental health because they don't have enough vitamin B, which is super helpful and on par. But then a lot about Jeff too.
no, there's like seriously like 5 things. She's like, yeah, McKinley told me this and this.
And I'm like, I haven't told her any of this. She doesn't know that Jeff's struggling with sleep right now, that he's not getting good sleep for some reason.
let's just throw that out. Or that I need energy work right now. Just
Jeff would really like you to go to the kitchen and get him some cheesecake.
yeah.
Well, like every couple can relate to this. When you have a child who passes, you don't heal in a parallel like track as the other person. And so like we're both in different places. And so Jeff's mom is just concerned about, residual trauma and stuff like that.
Way to sum that up. Speaking of being uncomfortable, though, with stuff that's happening on the other side, has your wife's gifts ever made you uncomfortable?
Yeah, for sure. I thought it was really, really weird at first. So I'd say, Camille's gifts didn't like blossom till she met Elle and did some, I don't know what you call them, like
Classes
Training.
with Elle.
Yeah,
Classes.
training.
And so, like, I'm a pretty open person. So she told me that she was going to do that. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. Like, Camille does lots of weird things. She's just very, like, unique and versatile and does things I would never do. And so, at first I was like, oh, cool, whatever, like, I knew at the time she had spiritual gifts. I was like, cool. But the more and more she did it, I was like, had to like evaluate more in my own brain. I was like, how do I really feel about this?
It's
I was
becoming a
like,
thing now.
yeah, it's becoming a thing where she's like into it, and which was fine, but I was
Gifted,
like,
gifted at it, not just into it,
yeah,
gifted at it.
gifted. So at the time I just thought into it though. I was like, okay, like now that she's like involved more, maybe I should think about how I really feel about it other than whatever. And so it felt like a little different and weird, especially like just within our church, like kind of like Madison said, like we talk about like having relationships with spirits all the time, but then like this just feels different for some reason to people.
Well,
Just real.
you're making that
Yeah.
step between me and my son having a communication versus me translating for somebody else. Like they can't make that step
Right.
themselves.
Yeah. It's more than just like your personal thing, but there's like, it's basically removing the limits of, oh, you can only like talk to, your son that passed away, or your grandma's trying to get in touch with you. It's like you can do that for other people too, because it's an actual gift that is more universal than just personal. And so
That's a good way to say it.
I had to kind of like just work through that in my mind. So there was like a period of time where I was probably uncomfortable is not the right word, because I was never uncomfortable with what she was doing, but I had like this dissonance or discomfort in my mind where I had to kind of come to terms with it and how like I felt about it.
I was never really worried more than anything. So like, because I remember when she was taking this course, she came and she's like, I want to take this course to kind of learn more about spirit communication and how to really hone in this gift that I think I have.
We were in law school
But
and we had nothing.
the thing for me was like, I just like prayed about it. She's like, should I do this? And I prayed about it. And it's like, yeah, no, that I got a good feeling about it. There's nothing wrong. Like, go ahead and do it.
And then the miracles, like particularly about the money. So the first one I did was in 2017 because
And that was my
that was in
second
the
year
middle
of
of
law
law
school.
school, and that was like you're destitute. You're in debt, not making money. Um, and the Lord provided a way. Like we both prayed about it. I was like, if this is meant to be something that I'm supposed to pursue, make it happen. Like make it happen. And he had an internship that he was doing over the summer that year, and it ended up giving us a double payment for some reason from the government. And we like what? And it was the exact amount of money that we needed to cover the cost of that initial step, that first course in 2017.
And never once have I ever felt anything bad. Like I know definitively when the Lord is speaking, when he's giving me a yes, when he's giving me a no. And never once has there been a, yeah, your wife needs to back off of what she's doing.
In
Like,
fact, he often reassures me.
yeah, and
Same.
I usually take the role of, she's like, I don't know if I think this is just me. I'm maybe I'm not really doing this. It's just I think I am, and people are encouraging me. And it's like, you literally were in Hawaii at the, is it the
Pearl
Arizona?
Harbor, yeah.
Yeah, you were at Pearl Harbor, and you saw a guy sit down and talk to him, and you got all this stuff, and then walked over, and his information was on a plaque.
While your wives have been developing these gifts, how have you seen them grow or change in them and in who they are?
Why don't you go first, Madison, while I think about that?
Yeah. So I know that like I've seen her become a lot more confident, and I've seen her like in our church a lot of times people are told like, hey, God's going to speak to you, he's going to direct you to do something, and you need to act on it. And for those who don't know my wife, she is extremely indecisive. And and like she's will waffle between, she even was like waffling about whether or not to marry me and if she wanted to stay with me after I had proposed, after she'd like bought her dress and we had the temple
I only did
and,
because
and
God told
everything
me
booked.
to.
Like she was still like, I don't know if I should marry you, like I don't know if that's right. And I'm like, you've literally received how many different like messages from God telling you to marry? So she's very indecisive, but with this gift, like when she talks about like how you communicate through the veil and everything with these spirits, like you have to be decisive. It's a, okay, I feel this, I feel the spirit saying this, I can't second guess it. This is, hey, this is what happened. Because if you start
Trust.
thinking, you get inside your head and you're not really it's not you communicating anymore. It's you talking to yourself and trying to convince yourself. So you have to be decisive of, okay, I'm getting a red car. I got to say red car, not just because I was watching, I was listening to a song and they said, you've got a red car. So, I've seen her be a lot more decisive,
Trusting.
and not just that, but also like I've seen her elevate and draw closer to God. That for me has been one of the biggest, you know, testimonies or pieces. I'm a lawyer, so we'll go with a lawyer term, evidence. It's the biggest piece of evidence um, in law school. Like our evidence professor said that evidence is not just like this one big key piece. It's a wall. Some bricks are bigger than others, but the bigger your wall, the greater your evidence, the better your case will be. And the biggest brick in the wall of evidence about how this is a gift from God is how I've seen this gift not just change her, but change the people that she's taught, see how it's changed the people that she's studied with. I mean, there's literally a lady that she was, Miranda. She was here on the podcast. She came back and found her faith again through Spirit Communication. And that's been the biggest thing for me, is seeing how much closer she is to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, to our Heavenly Father, and how much she can feel them more in her life. And it's been a blessing, not just for me, but also for our family, for our children, because, you know, having 4 kids, it's not easy. We were only a month into having 4, but having 3 kids wasn't easy. And I was always the one prone to losing my temper, and she'd be the one who'd be stepping in and, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that. It's like, okay, yeah. So, she's been the one seeing how her being closer to God has changed and transformed everyone in our family, and seeing how it's affecting our children and even their relationship with Christ and with God. It's been amazing.
Jeff, your turn.
Well, that was a real jerk move, Madison. How can I follow that?
You told him to go first.
I
That-
did.
that- Rookie move, counselor, letting
Rookie
opposition go
mistake right
first.
there. Well, what you said first off, with confidence, really struck a chord. Anyone who knows Camille knows she doesn't lack confidence. I always tease her because she was a Spanish tutor for a long time, right? And then one of the parents was like, "Oh, do you tutor French?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, I can do that."
Well, I did take a semester of French.
Okay, she took 1 semester of French.
Well, I was like basic French.
She didn't remember French at the time.
There's a lot of crossover between French and Spanish. They're both Latin rooted
I
languages.
speak Spanish. That is a lie. There's no crossover.
I also speak
I've
Spanish.
read
Anyways,
books in French
hey.
after knowing Spanish. I can't do it.
Yeah,
There's no
this
crossover.
is my turn, not yours. Anyway, so she's like, "Yeah, I can." So she's got confidence. She's like, "I can do things." But her confidence has grown a lot doing this. It's a hard thing, right? I kind of compare it a little bit to like giving like a blessing or something, where it's like Madison said, it's like you can't say what you're thinking. Like you have to connect, and that can be scary sometimes. It can be vulnerable. And so I've seen her kind of grow in those ways as she's had to do that a lot. And just like with Elle, she doubts herself sometimes and has to work through that. But I've seen she's become a more confident person in her ability and in knowing that what she's doing is a gift from God, and that it's okay to do. There's a lot of stigma around this sort of thing. Our discussions in our marriage have strengthened as we've talked about it. She loves sharing with me. She doesn't get too personal unless, obviously she has permission to do so, but she'll be like, had this great experience, helped this person in this way. And it's just like, she's been getting a lot of joy out of it too, because it's truly about like helping people connect to loved ones and heal. And so it's really like become her calling, honestly. And it's really become a calling for her, and like almost, I don't want to say like a life mission. That seems really stupid and cheesy, but like
Why not? You're so cheesy normally. Why?
You want me to do this ever again?
If we vomit though, they won't ever ask us back. So I mean,
I
there's no
know.
incentive for us to do well.
I don't think we've done bad enough that that's the case, unfortunately.
So like, have you noticed that like when Camille's doing like a session and helping people, like an ability to kind of push beyond her own limits? Because I know like with Elle, again, like, she just was pregnant and not getting a lot of sleep as things went on, and life gets in the way. Like I remember there was a Saturday where she had a couple of people lined up. She hadn't gotten a lot of sleep. Our boys were acting up and she was yelling. We were, it was just a horrible, not the most spiritual day for us. It definitely wasn't a proud parenting day. And she's like, this is going to be a terrible, like, I'm not connecting to the spirit at all. Like, and then like going into that session, and it's like, it was one of the most amazing So have you noticed situations like that where it's like things are really bad, and then, it kind of helps turn things around, or helps Camille push past her own limitations?
Oh yeah, definitely. There's been times where she's like felt sick, like stayed up late, exhausted. She's like, crap, I have a session. It's so hard to connect when you're tired and not feeling well. And
You can
and
connect when
then
you're
she'll
not
come
tired.
back,
It
she's
works
like,
that way.
killed it.
I don't say it like that.
That's how it comes in my head. But yeah, she doesn't say that. But
This is
like
mansplaining.
yeah, I'm mansplaining. So she'll come off and just be like, I had the most amazing session and it went so well. Because I'll ask her, I was like, did it go okay? Because you were worried. And she's like, yeah, it is just so amazing. And like you said, like it's a gift from God. He gives them a little juice to help out, I think.
Yeah.
When needed.
We had a sheriff come to our house in California to do a well check because our autistic daughter was screaming like a crazy person, and our neighbors were worried. So they sent the sheriff over, and then everything was fine. I mean, we explained that we're working on her getting her meds adjusted, and then I had a session 5 minutes later. So I was like, I can't take any of this stress.
Compartmentalize.
Yeah, and it forces me to be a calmer person. I can't get too wrapped up in drama or anger or frustration, because it's like I need to be able to tap in to what I'm getting from the other side. So we need to kind of let that go.
Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. This has been really, really fun. If you guys have questions for them, you should put them in the comments below. Otherwise, if you would like to reach out to Camille and Elle, those details will be below. Also, join our Facebook group and hit up our website. Again, everything you need to know, find below in the description. Thank you so much. See you next time.